Welcome to the Fourthstream podcast, where we are dedicated to finding hope. It's a challenge to determine authenticity with so many options, all of which are presented as the right or the best option. Today, Dave is talking about strategies which can help us discover and maintain authentic lives. Check out our hopeful resources at fourthstream.com.
Today, I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about authenticity. We kind of laid out the argument for chaos and order and imperfection, turbulence, suffering. I think that's the bigger backdrop for some of the things that I am exploring in this series. But with that is just a conversation about what's authentic. I mean, you have to ask that question when you're listening to me. You have to decide, okay, well, is what I'm hearing here with Dave, is it authentic? And you're processing through that kind of stuff all the time, and that's understandable. So thanks for joining me for this conversation about authenticity. Authentic to me means the real deal. There are a lot of different things and people that claim that they are authentic. So how do you get to the root of that as you live your own life and try to live it based on principles that are real? And authenticity has been a search that I've been on for a long time for my own life. But in order to have it for my own life, I have had to consider where to get insights into it. And so, like we talked about a little bit last time, science is truly pure, non-political or politicized data. That's what science is to me. So I look for authenticity there. You know, I don't want stuff that is shaped and molded by somebody who has a philosophical outcome, but I want to let the science speak for itself. So that's how I approach science. And then when it comes to philosophy, I want to enter into wrestling with meaning. And some people are better at that than others. I mean, some people are just kind of crazy with their premise or premises when they talk about philosophy. And some people are very reasoned, and I'm not just talking about now, I'm talking about historically as you look at the philosophers of history. And then you have the issue of faith related to authenticity. So I'm looking for authenticity in science, authenticity in philosophy, and also authenticity in faith, because authentic God connection is, in and of itself, it's so much different than religion. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But, excuse me, in the context of that, what I've discovered in looking for authenticity is that there are several different aspects to it. And now, admittedly, I picked this up after studying Jesus' life for quite a while, because as I looked at Jesus' life, I think he's my best shot at an authentic mentor. So that's the conclusion I've come to. And what I saw from Jesus' teaching and his life, and then the people that really took him seriously, is that an understanding of a pure heart, which to me isn't the thing that conjures up is the idea of nothing wrong with it, totally altruistic and perfect in every way. That's not what I'm talking about. Pure heart, the pure in heart will see God, Jesus talks about. I think that is speaking about the humbled in heart. Okay, so you can check that out for yourself. But when I'm looking for authenticity, I look for humility. Then right along with that, I look for the God connection, because if people are indeed connected to God, then there certainly is going to be some kind of authenticity there. That's going to result not in just merely being a do-gooder, but it's going to be taking God's kindness and sharing it with people in the world. And that's what I consider real doing kindness. So there's a circle here. Humility before God, having the right view of yourself, then encountering, because of that, you encounter God, and it opens up your relationship to God, and that allows you to do kindness, and real kindness is going to result in growing life. in the people we care about, the people that God brings into our life. So that's kind of right along with that science, philosophy, and faith thing. This is a real core of what I have learned, and I'm trying to pass on and communicate to other people, is that there's this circle that I can look at my experiences as I search for authenticity, and these can be keys to helping me understand what my authentic journey is going to look like. So, that idea of authenticity and the real deal. So, what are the things that I look for if I want to find people like that? If I am looking for benchmarks to find something that's real and something that's authentic. And so these are some of the things that I've bumped into with people that really help me to discern that. First of all, honesty. You know, if a person can't be honest, and I've had times in my life where I was very dishonest, so I get the contrast here between honesty and dishonesty, but authentic people who are experiencing the real deal, they're honest, and usually I found that they are not pretentious. Like, what you see is what you get. They're not trying to cover up their weaknesses and accentuate the things that might make them look good in other people's eyes. And so with that honesty and no pretense, there's the idea of no smoke and mirrors. And you know how you meet some people and you just kind of know that they're just full of BS because of how they communicate and what they communicate. So authenticity is straightforward, no smoke and mirrors. Right along with that, what I've found and what I've learned about this in my relationship with trying to be connected in this circle that I was just talking about is that it's not necessary to be religious in order to be authentic. This is one of the things that Jesus, I think, really dealt with very specifically. Religiousness isn't necessary in order to find authenticity. Now, some people are going to hear that and they're going to go, well, you know, you're crazy. Okay, I appreciate that. I'm not looking down per se on all religion. I'm just saying that being religious is not necessary in finding my authenticity as a person. It may be helpful to some people. It hasn't necessarily been helpful to me, and so I draw a difference between religiousness and then also the authentic experience with God. So we'll talk about that some as things unfold. Also, another interesting aspect of the real deal is that perfection is not required, and this is one of the places where, I don't know, people take pot shots at religion. You just think you're perfect, blah, blah, blah. But, when it comes to authentically living life, you don't have to be perfect to be authentic. In fact, if anything, what I've found is that if you are truly honest and don't live with pretense, your imperfection is more of an asset than it is a hindrance to you being who you're supposed to be or who you want to be. So all of that results with the idea of what's growing up, what's maturity, what's being authentic. And somehow, to me, I've figured out that knowledge is great. So knowing the right thing or knowing the thing that works, that's great. Added then to action, because I can know great things, but if I can't translate that in, this goes back to the circle thing that I was talking about a little bit, then how am I ever going to live a wise life? And that's what I think authenticity is. I think it's living in wisdom, and I think this can look a lot of different ways, but I think it's all tied into an authentic wisdom that is, I don't know, almost supernatural. So that's my take on that a little bit. There was a question, an interesting question. I don't know if you remember the story. Jesus has gone through his public ministry. It lasted 3 to 4 years, depending upon your reckoning of the different Passovers and the events. And he's coming to the end of it, and it's time for him to be delivered up to be crucified. And of course, the Jews wanted to crucify him. And Pontius Pilate, who was the Roman representative in the pesky state of the Jews of Israel, he was not feeling it. And in fact, his wife basically was warned in a dream, don't participate in this. So that's amazing in and of itself. But he makes an interesting comment, Pontius Pilate does, as he's having this pretty brief interaction with Jesus, really. Jesus doesn't have a whole lot to say. So Jesus talks about knowing what the truth is. And this is almost chilling to me. It's one of those things that is said in the Bible, but it's also said in life a lot. What is truth? And so how does that relate to a conversation about authenticity? Well, for me, I want to ask and answer that question. What is truth? I just don't want to have my own truth. I want to have authentic truth. And that then leads me to a conversation about if I want to have truthful relationships in this circle that I described earlier, I need to find authentic people, right? And this has been like a lifelong journey for me, becoming authentic myself. So I'm not projecting this only onto other people. But the idea that I want to hang out with people who reflect principles of authenticity. And so these are some of the things that I've found with this. It kind of picks up a little bit on what we've already talked about. But when somebody is genuine, back to the no pretense thing, you see what you get. A genuine person is an authentic person. I've also found that truly authentic people in their core and in their heart are also peacemakers. It doesn't mean that they're not animated. It doesn't mean that they don't have fun with life, all those kinds of things. But in the final analysis, they really want to see people be at peace with each other. So authentic people are genuine, they're peacemakers. And in addition to that, I would put in there, they're also kind. And this is a theme through Jesus' teaching. It's also a theme through the apostles. It's a theme through history. You can see it in most philosophers. Most of them would choose kindness every time. And so that's why when I see that kindness in a philosopher or a person, I have a tendency to be drawn to them. I think Jesus called these men of peace in the book of Luke. So when it comes to authentic people are also not thrown by shortcomings or imperfections. So this greater context that we're talking about. So for instance, I could walk in and spill my guts to somebody and say, I'm really struggling with this. And that person, if they're inauthentic, they're going to say, whoa, this is not my problem. I'm not going to mess with this. Take it down the road. Somebody else can deal with it. Or you can meet a person who's authentic that is going to reach into your shortcomings and the shortcomings of your story, and they're going to be drawn into that. And they're going to say, hey, well, what do I have to help this person? I find that authentic people really are truly persons, and they're genuine, and they're peacemakers, and they're kind, and they're willing to open their schedule, their heart to other people. Also, this could be a long list, and you probably have your own ideas as you've looked at people and what you've experienced in your relationships. But I've also noticed that authentic people are honest. They're serious-minded. This is a phrase that comes out of the book of James. They're quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. Authentic people have figured this out on some level, because if they go off the deep end with their anger, how much helpfulness can they give to the world around them? If they speak quickly without listening, then we're all about giving solutions that don't really have anything to do with the context. And so becoming a good listener has become a quest in my life. And I think I'm a much better listener than I was in my 20s or 30s or 40s, because I'm figuring out what it means to be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. So that's, I think, part of being authentic too. Right along with that, there's the idea of real humility. Remember the circle, the pure heart. Pure heart, know God, do kindness, grow life. That's the picture of a humble life. And it's not just the humility that's a false humility that gets me what I want. And then also, I've found that people who are lazy are usually not very authentic in anything but the fact that they're authentically lazy. People who are hardworking, and I spent time working construction as a young man. My father had a construction company, and so I really had like exposure to all kinds of strata of people in the socio-economic structure. And one of the things I look for is I look for hard workers. And it doesn't matter if you're a white-collar worker or a so-called blue-collar worker or a ditch digger, somebody who actually does some of the totally necessary but lowly aspects of life from some people's perspective. Hard-working people are often authentic wherever you find them. And so I always look for that. If people are lazy, it's really tough for me to see a lot of credibility in their authenticity. Another thing that I have found with authentic people is that they surround themselves with solid people. It's one of the goals my wife and I have had in our life is to kind of sift through our relationships. I mean, we're trying to help people move from here to there. When I started out my journey, I had a lot to get worked out because I wasn't one of these authentic people that I'm describing right now. But when you hang out with people who are solid, that can really help you with your authenticity and vice versa. Then you are taking the part of your giftedness and your authenticity that you've experienced and that you are passing it along to other people as well. Well, that leads to, as we talk about authenticity, you have to be able to discern who is inauthentic. And there are basically 4 things that came to mind as I thought about this. And there are probably more. You guys have your own ideas about what you see in authentic people as well as inauthentic people. But when somebody's a fake, that tips me off to their inauthenticity. Maybe they represent themselves one way in front of one person, and they have another persona for another group or another person, and that's a fake. I don't trust fakes because I try to discern that because it's inevitable where that inauthenticity is going to go because it's going to be self-serving, which then leads into the whole idea inauthentic people are opportunists. They're in it for what they can get. And so you always feel like you're being postured, so that that person can get the most out of you and maybe the other person that's involved in the triangle relationship. So fakes, opportunists tip me off to inauthenticity. Also people who lie. Liars, if you catch someone in a lie, not everybody can be truthful all the time. But a person who gets caught in an untruth or a lie or a white lie or a black lie or whatever you want to call it, they're hard to trust unless when they get caught or when that gets exposed, they take responsibility for the fact that they have participated with an untruth. This was really liberating to me because when I had my spiritual experience with Jesus years ago, I was a full-fledged liar. And so for me to learn how to deal with this issue between myself and people and to look at somebody and go, I didn't tell you the truth on that. I'm sorry about that. I'm going to try not to be that way anymore. Well, that took me like a couple of years to figure out how not to be a liar. And right along with that, and I hate to be too revealing of myself here, but I was also a cheat. And so inauthentic people are fake and they're opportunists. I'm obviously speaking out of my own experiences in my own life. They're liars, but they're also cheats. And what that means is that you promise one thing and you deliver another. And you're always moving things in a direction where you can get what you want. So those are kind of four aspects to being inauthentic, being a fake, an opportunist, a liar, and a cheat. And I kind of wanted to summarize this, and so this is my statement. You can count on these souls, or these type of souls, to always have the angle on what is best for self-promotion. And when you see it, you're looking at inauthentic people. And they're not good for your soul, and they're not good for your life. So if I personally, so we've talked a little bit about what authentic people look like and what inauthentic people look like. If I'm going to be authentic, because, what good does it do to evaluate the world around me if I'm not looking at myself and going, okay, well, what does that mean for me? Because I want to live the kind of a life that I can, be proud of, and at the end of it, stand before my Creator and hear the words, well done, good and faithful servant. So if I'm going to be authentic as a person, I need to hold to authentic principles, which have a foundational core and some kind of track record in the real world. We're living in a world right now where the core that people have is kind of slippery. And you can just kind of define and redefine your core. But if I'm going to be authentic as a person, I have to have authentic markers, underpinnings that hold me and have a track record in life. And so when you look at some of the people in history and look at how they lived their life, you can kind of see this by looking at the outcome of their life. That's part of finding authenticity. And like I have here at the bottom of this slide, you have to have a track record in the real world. It's about what I do. It's not just about what I say, it's about what I do makes me who I am. This is one of the things that I've discovered is different between the Western mind, the modern mind, and perhaps the Eastern thought. Eastern thought is, I'll tell you who you are based on what you do. Where I grew up, I will tell you who I am based on what I say. And so what I do is who I am. That's what makes me authentic. And so what I do has everything to do with those underpinnings of how I make and why I make the decisions that I do. So hopefully that's a helpful thought process for you. I think in concluding that part of it, when looking for authentic philosophies about life to adapt for myself, I need to consider the outcome of the lives who are espousing their philosophy. This is really important. Because, if you like what somebody says, but their story ends up being the fact that they're an axe murderer, well, maybe you want to consider the philosophies that they were espousing. So you get my idea here. I mean, that's kind of like a ridiculous, extreme thing, but you have to understand that from my perspective, how we treat people has everything to do with who we are and what kind of people we are. So with that, my statement, is train wrecks produce train wrecks. And if I want to live a life that's not a train wreck, I need to not be with other people who are train wrecks. I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but it's the train wreck analogy that so many people have used through history, and now I have certainly mastered it. So how does this relate to science and philosophy and faith? I'd like to relate this series to those things. And so my first statement related to science is that, they just shot up a new telescope, which I've been waiting for a decade or so. I lived through Hubble, and now I'm really excited about this new telescope. And of course, we're gonna see back to the beginning of things. I was kidding some friends the other day, so what are they going to do if when they go all the way back to the beginning with their photos, if they see like a finger, generating all of this into existence. But anyway, be that as it may, that's kind of a fanciful thought process there. Maybe no more fanciful than a lot of the alien philosophies that I have heard and seen during my lifetime. But when approaching the expanse of space and the intricacies of the amazing design of life, it may be a good idea to contextualize all of that with some sort of humility. I really don't have any problem at all with the time that the cosmos has existed. That makes God bigger to me, so I don't freak out about that. I understand why young Earth people think what they think, and I understand why some of the astrophysicists think what they think. Both people of faith, and I've kind of waded through that. But maybe some humility in this whole thing would be appropriate. I mean, I struggle with seeing humanity, even looking back at history of the last 250 years, and calling it right. We already want to rewrite what happened in history. Well, that's been going on for a long time, right? So when I think about that related to the expanse and the beauty of what is made in science, the idea that I would say to myself, I wasn't there at the time, so I didn't see it firsthand, or the idea that I'm not sure anyone knows the answer to that. That can protect us from becoming pawns, and check this out, such a wordsmith, pawns of faux factual accounts. Because when you put opinion together with facts, you basically are manipulating the truth. So faux factual accounts about any so-called truth. So that's how I feel about science. I love science. I love the facts of science. I just don't like the politics of all of that. So that's a little bit about philosophy, a little bit about, when it comes to science. Also, when looking for authenticity in faith, it may be a good idea to avoid as many historic religious influences as you possibly can. You can tell I'm not an intellectual, but I have done a lot of reading. And I've read my 7-volume things on church history, and when I awakened to God, I went back and got my Western Civ book, and I began a study of history, which has been going on for a number of decades. And what I realized is that I just don't want to be religious. There are upsides and there are downsides to religiousness in history, but I don't really want to associate with what that's become in the modern era as we look back. And so I want to avoid as many historic religious influences as possible and deal with raw data untainted by prejudice or self-interest. And we'll comment on that because I know you have thoughts about that, because everybody has thoughts about that. But my question is it possible that this is exactly why the ancient religion of the Jews didn't cut it with Jesus? It was that they were taking the backdrop of their religious experiences, and they were taking it and they were twisting it to get what they wanted. I see a lot of that in history. I don't blame it on any one particular person, but I think it's kind of the nature of humanity is to do that. So that's a thought. So what do you conclude from that? What do we conclude from that? If I'm going to find authenticity then in personal faith, which I think my view of science and art and wonder and my view of philosophy can be very helpful to that. Excuse me. If I'm going to find authenticity in personal faith, it's going to surely arise from several things. First of all, accurate evidence of how God has spoken directly through what has been made. I owe it to myself to figure that out. Has God accurately communicated? The second thing related to that is when it comes to finding authenticity in personal faith, has God communicated through an authentic source? And there's all the religions of history and there's all the sources and you can look at them, which I've done. I've investigated them and I've thought, okay, I think there is an authentic source. I've had to answer that question for myself. I really don't care what you think about it. I don't care what any pastor or preacher or priest or great theologian, that's not the point. The point is that I need to know whether God has communicated through an authentic source, which I've answered that question, but I've also investigated it. I haven't just taken somebody's yeah, blah, blah, blah about what they think about that. Also, then, is there substantial evidence that God has shown up on earth to communicate with us? And this is really one of the reasons why I've settled in on Jesus, because that's everything about the Jesus story. Hundreds of years before he arrived, hundreds of years after he left, there is substantial evidence that God has shown up on the earth to communicate with us. So I just kind of wanted to open the door to different aspects of authenticity so that we can have that as a backdrop. So you've got the bigger picture of chaos and order and imperfection and turbulence and suffering. So you've got that backdrop, and then you've got science and philosophy and faith. And now we're talking about questions related to authenticity. You and I have only so much time, right? And think about your week and how much time did you spend watching sports, and how much time did you spend on the internet searching for things, and how many times did you spend working on your yard, and how much time did you spend at work? You look at all those things, and those are all part of life. I get that. But I have to ask myself the question, how much time am I spending working on the authenticity of my soul? So I've taken that seriously, and it's been good for me to take that seriously. So asking the question, how can I know if I'm an authentic person or not, which, kind of subjective, right? What is a solid process for, sifting through the basis for my own authentic beliefs? So how do I do that to figure out if my beliefs are authentic? And so I feel like asking questions is huge. If I'm unwilling to ask questions and just close my mind as soon as a new question comes up, I just think that's not a very good idea, because if you're not asking any questions, then why would you explore? And exploration is how we continue to learn. Do you actually think that when you got your college degree and you walked down the aisle, if that was still going on at the time, and you celebrated with your party and you started your first job, do you actually believe that you were totally prepared for everything that was ahead? No, there are really good things about life and education and being launched out of a home, for better or for worse. But the reality is that you're still stuck with exploring life, right? So you ask questions. You don't stop asking questions just because you're not in an academic environment anymore, right? So you ask, that leads to exploring, and like any good scientific thinker, you're going to test out the things that you're exploring, the things that you're seeing. The experience, the learning is going to continue in your life, and then that results in acting. And when I act, I am taking what I'm articulating in my core, and this kind of goes back to the pure heart, know God, do kindness, grow life. I'm deciding, what am I going to do with those authentic principles that are inside of me? Voila. So I believe that Jesus was the greatest human to ever live. And now, this is a bodacious statement right here, but have you really thought it through from a non-religious perspective? If you're listening to me right now and going, well, Jesus, blah, 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 and you're turning me off. Okay, I can understand that, but I did a lot of soul-searching, investigating, processing, and I came to this conclusion. I believe Jesus was the greatest human to ever live, and that he experienced authentic relationships on every level. His faith, his beliefs, his interactions. I believe he's totally in harmony with science. I believe he was totally in harmony with the essence of what philosophy's questions were looking to answer. And so, what did that look like? Which is why we kind of have the Gospels. It's kind of why we have the Bible. It's the first-hand accounts. And when I ask the question, what did these look like? I make the statement, shouldn't everybody know how they feel about this? And not just fall into the idea that, well, he's just one of many religions. There's some real problems with that. If you actually ask the questions and if you actually search, there's some real problems with that. Oh, that's kind of a shallow way of interpreting what Jesus has done. Jesus had his detractors, and among them were religious leaders primarily, and they appointed people to try to trip him up, and they used lawyers for this. I'm not sure that this is an indictment of the law profession throughout history, because I don't know a lot about what the lawyers looked like then, but I can imagine. And I love this because this is how Jesus dealt with these things. One of them, a lawyer, asked him a question, testing him, saying, "Teacher, Rabbi, which is the great commandment in the law?" Okay. Jesus said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength." And the second commandment, hangs with it, 100%. You shall love your neighbor as you love yourself. On these two commandments depend the whole law and the prophets. And that to me really sums up authenticity in a nutshell as far as me finding an authentic journey, okay? Now, you don't have to agree with everything that I say, but hopefully that whole idea about asking your own questions, weighing those things out, not just accepting processed BS that's been shot your way, and finding your own data, your own information. Hopefully that will be good for you as a person and help you find authenticity, whatever that looks like in your faith, your view of science, and your view of philosophy. Thanks so much for joining me in this conversation. I almost feel bad for you that you have to go through this, because here I am trying to take things that I've been looking at for a long time and condense them into short conversations. But hopefully it just opens up windows and doors of things that we can talk about a little bit later.
Thanks for listening to our podcast. You can find posts and podcasts on tons of subjects at Fourthstream.com, along with encouraging music which can be shared by a variety of ages. Finding hope at Fourthstream.com.